it in a burst, yeah, right at FuSha Works.
No Man's Land, afternoon tea in Asia. When presented with the words afternoon tea, one would usually think of a small group of ladies sipping tea daintily with their pinkies raised and munching on various forms of sweets, such as macaroons and iced cupcakes. Of course, reality is not too far from this mental image. In places that serve afternoon tea in Asia, few men can be found. Thinking this is an interesting phenomenon, our group will be attempting to research the reasons why Asian men may not be so keen on attending afternoon tea. It is important to note that the idea of afternoon tea as desserts consumed in the afternoon is not exclusive to any single culture. Even in Asia, there are desserts which are consumed in between meals as a means to refresh the palate or to satisfy hunger. Therefore, for the purposes of our investigation, the idea of afternoon tea in our discussion will refer to the British practice of having tea with traditionally Western sweets such as scones with clotted cream and jam, sweet pastries and cakes, usually in a posh setting such as a cafe or a hotel. Traditional pre-colonial Asian desserts such as rice cakes will not be included in our discussion. Afternoon tea was first introduced in England by the 7th Duchess of Bedford in the year 1840. It has evolved as a mini-meal to stem the hunger and anticipation of an evening meal, served fashionably late at about 8 p.m. The Duchess asked for a tray of sandwiches, cakes and tea to be brought to her room at around 4 o'clock to avoid fatigue from hunger. This practice soon became widespread and the pause for tea became a fashionable social event. Afternoon tea has now become a favorite pastime for ladies. Historically, afternoon tea was considered to be a high society ladies' social occasion. Now, however, much has changed. While still often referred to as afternoon tea in England, the name high tea has been adopted by most other countries and is sometimes referred to as that by English venues with international audiences, such as in hotels. The word high is often associated with high society, which cements the luxury and extravagance associated with the practice of afternoon tea. In Britain, afternoon tea is usually enjoyed as an occasional indulgence or to celebrate a special event, such as a birthday or pre-wedding or a baby shower party with a group of friends regardless of gender. Men in the West have started to consider tea to be a form of interaction. In online forums, men have stated that afternoon tea is just a snack in the late afternoon, no different from other meal appointments like breakfast or lunch. Hence, afternoon tea in the West has become more of a widespread habit rather than just a gendered practice. On the other hand, afternoon tea in Asia is still regarded as a feminine, upper-middle-class activity. Traditionally, Asians usually eat 3 meals a day. Even if Asians were to indulge in desserts in between meals, they regard these desserts as mere snacks, instead of making time to sit down for another meal. As pointed out previously, confectionery served during afternoon tea sessions are not traditionally Asian and only came about during the early 20th century when the Japanese colonized part of Asia in the aftermath of the Meiji Restoration. The Meiji Restoration aimed to create a Japanese state that was of equal standing amongst Western powers, as many Western practices were adopted during this time. Sugar, in particular, grew to become one of the most imported goods to Japan, second only to cotton. This shows the burgeoning market for Western confectionaries and new Western sweets. However, despite this, the confectionaries were very expensive during that era, and many other Asian countries outside of Japan were not able to afford these sweets. Hence, in many parts of Asia, Western confectionaries are seen to be a luxury goods that can only be afforded by the small number of elite. In addition to the luxury that is attached to these confectionaries, afternoon tea as a culture in former British and French Le Goûter colonies have been marketed as exclusive elite meals by big hotel chains. In these places, high tea and afternoon tea are often used interchangeably, once again emphasizing the idea that tea as an activity is only enjoyed by members of high society. In Singapore, hotels such as Shangri-La, Grand Hyatt, Intercontinental and Westin are offering the British afternoon tea experience at exclusive prices ranging about 40 to 50 Singapore dollars per person. The pricing range is definitely not affordable for a middle-lower class individual on a day-to-day basis. The customers seen frequenting these hotels are mostly tourists, traveling business personnel, or Singaporean females from the upper social class. Now we will focus more on why exactly we do not see men in afternoon tea places in Asia. We will try to analyze this phenomenon from two angles. Firstly, why men do not particularly enjoy going for afternoon tea, and secondly, why women are so fond of going for afternoon tea. Firstly, there is a sense of frivolity attached to the consumption of sweets, particularly Western confectionery, and the practice of having afternoon tea. As pointed out earlier, the sweets served during afternoon tea are not traditional desserts. They often have little to no nutritional value and cannot fit into the traditional Asian meal plans, and are also much more expensive than normal Asian food served during meals. As a result, the consumption of sugar and sweet confectionaries was seen as problematic among Asians. When there is a liking or a preference for sweets, people will have to spend more on them as opposed to actual meals. This symbolizes a depreciation of food and nutrients, which in turn implies frivolous and consumerist behavior. Asians, therefore, have historically shunned these confectionaries. For example, in Korea, sweet products comprised less than 6% of the grocery budget until the 1980s. Hence, as the typical breadwinners of the family, men are expected to be devoted themselves to their jobs and provide financially for their family. Spending an afternoon at a restaurant to consume these sweets, which already is a symbol of frivolity and luxury, seems to be consumerist and a non-essential activity that takes precious time away from work. This may also be responsible for the reasons why men are still reluctant to go for high tea today. Secondly, in Asian languages, the word sweet may have less than favorable connotations, which may dissuade men from attending afternoon tea sessions and associating themselves with consuming this sweet confectionery. In English, the connotations of the word sweet is unambiguously positive. On the other hand, in some Asian languages, the word sweet also implies weakness and sloppiness, or are often used to describe lovely girls or cute behaviors. Consequently, in Asian societies, sweetness has metaphorical and overwhelming associations with weakness and dependency, which is exclusively for women and children. At meals, Asian men typically are expected to forgo sweets in favor of spicy foods or alcohol. In Japan particularly, locals ascribe Japan's economic stagnation to the new generation of grass-eating boys whose interest in sweets indicates their femininity and passiveness. Therefore, there may be an internalized aversion to sweets and occasions in which these sweets and desserts play a main role, such as afternoon tea. As a result, men may be hesitant to go to afternoon tea in fear of seeming feminine. Now we will consider why afternoon tea is enjoyed by Asian women. We believe that afternoon tea is possibly a symbol of emancipation from traditional Confucian duties as the frugal housewife. In Confucian values, a woman's chief virtue in food culture is to cook and serve, not consume. Asian women are expected to dedicate their lives to their extended family and be resourceful and frugal housewives. To spend an afternoon idling and consuming sweets that cost much more than an average meal is definitely not aligned with traditional Confucian values. Afternoon tea was hence an activity that would have been actively looked down upon by the men of the family, and the woman would not have been allowed to go for these activities due to the consumerist and frivolous nature of it. Therefore, in contemporary society, being able to go for afternoon tea and making their choice to spend more on sweets than food can therefore be seen as a marker of a modern woman who is financially independent. She can choose to spend more money on sweet if she wishes to do so, instead of having to bend to her husband's whims because he is the sole breadwinner. Now, with the increased consumption power and social standing of women, they are able to actively enjoy a frivolous activity and normalize it. Additionally, perhaps due to the fact that more women than men go for afternoon tea, the corporations and hotels marketing afternoon tea have caught on and directed their marketing effort to women instead of men. Most advertisements promoting afternoon tea are geared towards women, as seen in the examples below. We can see that promotional pictures always include groups of women, and there are noticeably no men in sight. This might cement the idea that afternoon tea is a feminine activity and make men feel even more excluded from afternoon tea. Furthermore, women enjoy various discounts for afternoon tea, such as on Women's Day and Mother's Day. Some afternoon tea places even have offers for bridal parties and bridal showers. However, the same cannot be said about men's festivals, such as Father's Day, and no similar discounts for groomsmen are offered. This may result in a vicious cycle, where the marketing techniques of these afternoon tea places reinforce the gendered stereotypes of afternoon tea and sweets served. To conclude, we have addressed a number of reasons why there are few men observed in afternoon tea places in Asia, and unveiled a number of deeply ingrained stereotypes about sugar and Western confectionaries in Asia. Different genders attach different meanings to these Western confectionaries. However, the difference is that men actively buy into the stereotypes and shy away from the practice of afternoon tea, while women defy these stereotypes and enjoy afternoon tea despite the traditionally negative views on it as a frivolous and consumerist activity. By and by, it has become the norm for women to enjoy afternoon tea in Asia, while men are still hesitant to participate in this activity. In the end, the stigma around afternoon tea is still socially constructed, so we believe that if men do enjoy afternoon tea and the consumption of these sweets, they should ignore the stereotypes and actively participate in this activity. After all, Asian women had faced the same negative stereotypes surrounding such frivolous activity, unbecoming of the image of a frugal housewife that Asian values celebrate.